Hello everyone, how are you? I hope you're all doing well because today I'm welcoming you to the third season of What If Naruto Awakened the Wood Element, Mokuton, as a child? Let me know in the comments what future fanfics you'd like to see on the channel. Now then, enjoy.
A month or so had passed since Naruto had met his new Jounin teacher. The man had been having the three of them do teamwork and tactical drills and teaching them when and how to use what they knew as training. Nothing else. At least of what he knew about their skills. That was on top of way too many D ranks. To Naruto, learning only those things and losing so many hours in a day was torture. According to Tsunade, Yamato's methods were good. Naruto thought that the man was holding them back. But there had to be a reason Tsunade approved, so he wasn't complaining. Yet, there was also the fact that the daimyo, feudal lord, of Fire Country had agreed with the choice of Hokage, the Third's advisors, and the Jounin Council had decided on, which had made Naruto relax a bit in relief. Asterisk. Naruto had also thought some things over and decided to put more effort into learning medical skills due to fully realizing that they were a literal lifesaver, which he was going to tell his aunt soon. He was in Shikatsu Forest at the moment and was due to meet her in a few minutes. He looked around. Shikatsu Forest always looks so different when it's so early in the morning. Naruto thought to himself. The eerie effect of the twilight, just before sunrise, made the trees of Shikatsu Forest look even more haunted than usual. Naruto shivered a bit, but it was out of excitement. Yamato's reading habits had rubbed off on Naruto, even though he still didn't trust the man. The horror genre appealed to Naruto much more than he'd have expected from books. On the other hand, Naruto had started learning about architecture, too. That was mostly because he wanted to learn how to build houses, though the way ANBU Wildcat had made a small one using Mokuton. He had talked it over with his aunt, and Shizen had a point. A lot of things would go into making a hidden village, and housing was one of the most important ones. Naruto felt like he was forgetting or missing something all of a sudden. For some reason, a creaking noise sounded to his left, making Naruto turn to look. Another came from behind him, which made him get into a taijutsu stance. Something that sounded like laughter was coming from Auntie Tsunade? Naruto said, "What the hell?" Tsunade's laughter and snorting took a few more seconds to stop. She said, "Ha, you can't be a ninja if you're paranoid, Naruto. You need to keep vigilant at all times, but paranoia will kill you as surely as laxity will." Turning serious. "Besides, all those pranks you and Bawako have tried to get me with, well, I couldn't just let them pass." Then starting to laugh once again, Naruto groaned in annoyance, but he didn't protest further. He only said, "Well, I have another announcement to make." Tsunade looked ready to say something mocking, so Naruto continued hastily, saying, "Wanna be a medic nin?" His aunt only raised an eyebrow. Naruto then said, only slowing down a little, I haven't put as much effort as I could have into becoming a medic nin, Tsunade-sensei. I've decided to do my best at that. For real. I'm still gonna learn frontline skills and about leadership too, though. Especially Mokuton. Well, maybe something will just click, and I'll find how to use Mokuton to suppress Shikaku. His aunt smiled. Just a little upturn of the lips for a moment. She said, "That's great and all, Naruto, but you've been overdoing it for a long time, and now you have even more things to learn. Watch out, because you can and will burn out. Especially if Shikaku helps." Was that true? Naruto thought it over for a bit. He actually had a social life, though not that great of one. He slept as normally as was possible for him, all things considered. He hadn't been overworking himself. Tsunade hadn't told Naruto anything about that, except when she had him cut down on the clones, and that was for another reason. Wait. Auntie Tsunade told me that the memories might overwhelm my young brain, but now that I know more about the shadow clone and the wood clone, I know that it takes a huge number for that to be a problem. The mental fatigue could also be a problem, but it was only one if the user of the clones was at their limits already or, again, if using a truly huge number. Naruto said, "Ugh, you tricked me again. Didn't you? When you told me to cut down on the clones, you were worried about me overworking myself, not anything else." Seeing Tsunade cross her arms under her chest, Naruto couldn't help his annoyance. He said, "I'm just fine. I've been training like this for 2 years and you never said anything." Talking more loudly, what made Naruto pause was that Tsunade didn't shout back like usual. She calmly said, Naruto, what are your hobbies? Without thinking it over, Naruto said, taking care of my garden, reading manga, and recently, reading horror books and books about architecture. You know that, Auntie Tsunade, not getting where this was going. How much time have you spent the past few months just doing something to relax or for pleasure? You yourself, not your clones, Tsunade said, bringing Naruto up short. Thinking it over for a few seconds, he came to a startling realization. I haven't put more than a few hours a month taking care of my garden for about half a year. These days, it's all about getting money for my future project, so I mainly use clones. I've been learning about architecture to help with the project, again. I haven't read a manga I don't even remember. Naruto looked at his aunt, whose expression was unreadable. Even her chakra wasn't giving away anything. He gritted his teeth, then said, reading horror stories is my only real hobby these days, and I only started it a month ago. Rubbing his forehead, Naruto forced himself to look at his aunt again. He had finally realized that she had a really good point. That didn't keep him from being angry, though. Angry at himself, at his aunt, at everyone and everything, maybe. He wasn't certain why. Tsunade had let him stew in his thoughts. Naruto realized, but she opened her mouth again. She said, now, do you get why I tried to limit your training? Not to mention it's fortunate that, before meeting me, neither you nor Bawako got any serious injuries with all those elemental ninjutsu and all-out spars without proper supervision, and that the only permanent damage either of you had from training accidents was Bawako's mild nerve damage in the wrist. Naruto didn't reply out loud beyond sighing. He knew he had to think over some things, though. Tsunade gave Naruto a kiss on the forehead and left, poofing away. Naruto-kun, Katsuyu said, you are about to be late to your meeting with your team. Naruto immediately jumped to his feet. He had been about to ask Katsuyu for help when they beat him to the punch, saying, I would like you to try using the reverse summoning jutsu to reach the seal in the Uchiha district, Naruto-san, instead of letting yourself get back to where you started. Naruto said, I haven't gotten it down well enough. It takes me a bit of time to succeed, so I'll probably be late. A bit agitated. Then do it fast enough this time, Naruto-kun, Katsuyu said, though not unkindly. Naruto realized that they were right, as was his aunt. He likely would have to cut down on his training time, but there were other ways to make sure he'd get stronger. He would try to find tricks to make the most of his training time, take full advantage of everything he had in his arsenal and concentrate fully whenever he trained. Naruto had managed to use the reverse summoning jutsu to get to Konoha in record time, but he wasn't sure if he had managed what he had set out to do. Reaching the bridge of Training Ground 3, in a run, almost sprint, Naruto bled off his momentum gradually, coming to a stop on the railing sideways, sticking to it with chakra, breathing a bit faster than usual. So kind of you to join us, Naruto, Yamato said dryly, which made Naruto realize he was late. You are 4 minutes late, the man then said. Naruto bit his lip in his frustration, mainly aimed at himself. There will be no formal admonishment. As long as you understand that this won't be tolerated again. That is, Yamato said, his face going completely blank in a creepy way. Understood, Yamato-sensei? Naruto said between clenched teeth, his frustration directed at someone other than himself, this time. Well, it's better than the opposite extreme, at least, Naruto thought to himself. Kakashi had gone from being late by seconds or minutes every time to making the entire village wait for almost an hour, late to his own inauguration ceremony. Yamato nodded, saying nothing else to Naruto. Then he said, we have been requested for a relatively urgent mission. Naruto perked up. Requested? Mito was the one who spoke first, saying, what do you mean requested, Yamato-sensei? They said, Team 7? Yamato shook his head. He said, the request is for you, Mito. No. To be exact, the request is for the best ceiling user Konoha has in its ranks. Mito let out a then said, why isn't Jiraiya-sensei going? Folding her arms in front of her chest. Not that I don't want to go. She then said, a note of urgency in her voice. Yamato smiled for what felt like the first time, saying, well, we asked him. He said, and I quote, bah, let Mito go. I have better things to do. Besides, the kid can do stuff with seals that sometimes leave me with an open mouth and I taught her." End quote. Mito was very flattered. The blush and smile on her face made that obvious. Naruto itched to ask Yamato what the mission was about, but someone beat him to the punch. Bawako said, "Yamato-san, what and where is this mission going to be?" Yamato hummed and didn't reply, making Bawako grimace and also annoying Naruto. The moment Team 7 entered the administrative building, Naruto realized there was something off. Looking around, he noticed Mito was on edge and Bawako was starting to be like that too. Once inside Kakashi's office, Naruto could tell there was tension in the air. Kakashi's only visible eye focused on Naruto. Kakashi's facade of Nara-level laziness nowhere to be seen. The man said, Well, can you answer a question of mine, Naruto?" "What is it, Hokage-sama?" Naruto said, making sure to use the title to distance himself from the idiots who would disrespect Kakashi. Kakashi put a few pictures on the desk. Naruto bent down to see whisker marks in red marker on various throats. "So, she managed it perfectly. You go, Mito," Naruto thought to himself. He hadn't been sure when Mito had asked to be the one to do the actual job, but she was the more stealthy one, strangely enough. "So, going by your triumphant smirk, you know something about this?" Kakashi said, his expression unchanged. Naruto shrugged, realizing that yes, he was smirking. Kakashi leaned back in his chair, then said, Well, what?" Naruto answered back before he could stop himself, ignoring Yamato's reprimand without even looking at him. "What do you know?" Kakashi said, his body language making him look lax. "I know that they likely deserved it," Naruto said, losing the smirk in favor of raising a corner of his upper lip in a sneer. After Kakashi made a gesture for him to continue, Naruto said, "They may or may not have been the culprits behind what happened at Ichiraku's." Yamato took over at that point, one of the photographs in hand. He said, "This throat is too small to be an adult's or even a teenager's. Just what were you trying to say here?" His voice sounding more frantic than Naruto had ever heard it. Naruto looked between Kakashi and Yamato, his eyebrows lifting despite himself. He said, "Who says it's me who did this?" Secretly, Naruto wondered if Mito had realized what she was doing but been too furious to hold back, or hadn't fully understood the implications. The sudden gasp from her told Naruto that she hadn't realized. Hopefully, the scoff Naruto had just let out had covered it. Yamato gritted his teeth, but Kakashi was looking straight at Naruto again. He said, "Naruto, did you do this? Or maybe clones of yours?" "No, not me, not my clones," Naruto said truthfully. "Do you know who did this? Were you involved?" Kakashi then said, insistent. Naruto said, "Maybe and maybe. Now, is there anything else, Hokage-sama?" Wanting to move on to more important things. Kakashi and Yamato shared a look. Then Kakashi said, "That is all. Tell Chirika-san to enter in a moment, Yamato." Naruto sighed as quietly as he could. All this was all kinds of stressful. Dealing with the people of Konoha in general was stressful, even with those he liked. Fortunately, they hadn't realized what Mito was capable of if her loved ones were threatened. Naruto strained his hearing, because he noticed Kakashi saying something else to Yamato. "Even if it loses me political capital, I'm not going to back off," Kakashi said at a low volume near Yamato's head. "The third was weak. That much, Danzo is right about. I won't repeat the third's mistakes, even if I'm not sure how many were his own." Naruto wasn't sure what Kakashi was talking about. Was the man under pressure to, what? Punish Naruto? Or was it something else? Could be something irrelevant. But Naruto would keep his ears peeled and his eyes open. Yamato walked out of the office and said, "Will the one named Chiriku come in?" A minute or so later, a tall bald man walked into the office. He looked to be around 30. No. This man was definitely much younger than that, maybe 25, Kakashi's age, despite the lack of hair. The robes he had on were definitely strange clothing, as was the fact he had the symbol for fire on a sash around his waist. Something about the clothing was nagging at Naruto. There was also something peculiar about the man's movement and body language, even when bowing to Kakashi. Just as Naruto realized that the fire sash showed the man as a member of the 12 guardian ninjas, Kakashi made a gesture, prompting the bald man to straighten himself and say, "Hokage-sama, well met. Asuma seemed to hold you in high regard. From the things he told me." Kakashi paused for a moment, then said, "Chirika-san, I've also heard some extremely good things about you from Asuma. It's great to meet you." Chirika's expression shifted and he said, "If only our meeting could have been under better circumstances." His face looking as if it had aged a decade in seconds. Naruto could see Mito shift in place from the corner of his eye, maybe out of impatience. Well, truthfully, Naruto really wanted to get on with the mission, too. He suppressed that urge, though, and made sure to pay attention. Chiriku said, "One of the young trainees at the Fire Temple has some kind of uncontrollable power. We need an expert on Fuinjutsu to help the young man with that problem. Because while we have plenty of experts of our own, none can do anything about this. It is outside of all our specialties, so to speak." Yamato nodded after hearing that. He said, "Well, we have one of the foremost sealing users in the world. What do you think, Mito?" Turning to her, at almost the same time Mito spoke, Chiriku did a double take. She said, "I've got this, no problem." Grinning, Chiriku said, "Wait, the expert is a fresh genin?" Looking at Mito, his eyes open wide. "Isn't he supposed to be a monk?" Naruto thought to himself. He had thought monks were unflappable. After Kakashi explained that Mito was fully qualified, Chiriku seemed somewhat mollified. Chiriku gave the all-clear to travel through the trees. He said, "I have shinobi training and this is a true emergency." Sounding very impatient for a monk, all 5 of them were able to keep at a decent clip, though Chiriku kept pushing for a faster pace, until an exasperated Yamato told him off for asking too much of genin. "Well, actually, Yamato-sensei, this is a pretty comfortable pace. I can go faster very easily," Naruto admitted. Yamato looked at Biwako and Mito, and both nodded. At an unspoken signal, Team 7 sped up significantly, with Chiriku increasing his speed soon after to keep up. Less than 2 hours later, Chiriku told them they were almost there. The 5 of them dropped to the ground. None of them was breathing noticeably harder, but Naruto shivered. He had a bad feeling about this. Yamato still directed them to move in a slow jog to arrive ready for anything. Biwako sighed, saying, "This isn't good. I can smell death," making Chiriku move faster, leaving them behind. Yamato sped up, making the rest of them speed up too. Just a few moments later, Naruto started realizing what had felt so wrong. He looked at Mito, but she wasn't releasing any bijou chakra. He looked down despite himself, but of course, there was no chakra leakage. The traces felt much more like Mito after having used the Kyuubi's chakra than Shikaku. Though, after going up a lot of stairs fast, they arrived to a scene out of nightmares. Blood and some gore, including body parts, were scattered around the yard of the temple, distracting Naruto from everything else. He could hear Mito retching and had a hard time withstanding the smell, even while covering his face with a sleeve. Even though he had worked as an assistant to medic Neens before, Biwako, even if she had the best nose, was able to keep her stomach settled, though Naruto could tell by the movement of her fingers and her slight shiver that she had been affected, emotionally speaking. A few moments later, Chiriku came out of the temple, running. He said, "Please help Goji and Chukakadano. Does one of you have training in medical ninjutsu?" His voice coming out hurried and his breathing hard. Naruto considered hiding his skills, but he couldn't bring himself to stay idle in the face of so much desperation. He wasn't like Konoha's citizens. It also helped that the monks weren't exactly Konoha citizens themselves. "Maybe Mito and Shizune are rubbing off on me." Then Naruto said, "I have some. I can't make any promises dash." Chiriku waved Naruto off, saying something about a small chance of survival being better than certain death. Yamato signaled for Naruto to carefully spend his chakra to stay battle-ready behind Chiriku's back, to which Naruto nodded. Even before Naruto reached the room where the injured were being taken care of, he realized that the traces of bijou chakra were just as strong in there as in the courtyard. Entering the place that served as the temple's infirmary, he noticed what seemed like a monk applying cold compresses on the foreheads and under the armpits of 2 other men. One's lying on beds. Chirika-san, the man said. I'm doing my level best, but where is the young medic Nin you mentioned earlier? Feeling strangely hesitant, Naruto walked forward and checked the patients. I feel like my hands are shaking and yet they're perfectly steady, like usual. He did some routine checkups, just in case there were more problems than the obvious, then started healing both the men's obvious wounds, mostly in the shape of claw marks and heavy bruises. All those injuries were accompanied by burns. Naruto made sure to stem the bleeding and apply burn paste while still keeping the wounds a little bit open, then changed the compresses. After that, Naruto set to isolating the Bijou chakra using the mystical palm. The younger man, who had had worse wounds, had more Bijou chakra in him and a higher fever, was first. That chakra, it's extremely potent. Naruto was having a hard time keeping hold of it with his own. Wait, Naruto thought to himself. It's getting easier. The Bijou chakra is getting less volatile. Maybe it was his bloodline's properties extending to his chakra. Once Naruto had gotten the traces of Bijou chakra in the man's chakra circulatory system closer to the surface, he unsealed a scalpel and made 2 incisions, widening the mostly closed injuries. Naruto ignored the cries of alarm he heard in order to guide a visible cloud of red chakra into his own hands. He surrounded the cloud and spun it using his own green-colored chakra, not knowing what else to do to contain it. Wait, did it just get smaller? Naruto examined the red cloud more carefully. According to the second Hokage's notes, absorbing chakra called for the absorber to either spin their own in such a way that it matched the other chakra's natural spin in a certain way, though there were no details about the certain way, or use tilted chakra of the opposite alignment if it was yin-style or yang-style chakra. The former applied in this case. Naruto, thanks to being a sensor type, knew just which parts of the red cloud were diminishing. After a little bit of trial and error, he realized that what was needed was spinning his own chakra in the same direction as the other one was spinning naturally. No, it doesn't always work. It only works sometimes. Why? Naruto had never read anything about that, but his hypothesis was that the revolution of chakra wasn't the same on every part of the spin. He had noticed that it slowed down or even stopped every 700 to 750 milliseconds. Maybe? He just had to predict the point where the revolution slowed down and the exact time, apply his own chakra in such a way that the opposing chakra was diverted. Naruto set out to do just that. After more trial and error, he realized that a spiral was the best shape to use to absorb it into himself, though not all spirals were equally good, and his diminished chakra control because of Shikaku's presence made it harder for him to be fully precise. He would have to test his findings and hypotheses more later. When did all the red chakra disappear? Naruto realized he had zoned out with a start. After realizing what had happened and where he was, he checked and confirmed that the patient was stable, bandaged the cuts and moved on to the next one, the elderly man. The entire process took a lot less time on this patient, with Naruto noting that the best spirals to make his chakra follow in order to absorb the opposing one efficiently were bigger for every quarter turn by approximately 50 to 70% compared to the previous quarter turn. Checking the patient's stability, Naruto immediately grew alarmed. His pulse was erratic and soon disappeared. After a quick check, Naruto was near certain that the man was going into cardiac arrest. I should have realized. His heart couldn't take the strain. He's old. I should have treated him first. Naruto started doing CPR. Since it wasn't a lung problem Naruto had checked dash, he used only his hands, no mouth to mouth. He looked at Bawako, but her blank expression made Naruto rethink his idea of asking for her help. Does anyone here have proficiency with the lightning element? He asked while pressing on the elderly monk's chest repeatedly. Chiriku came up to Naruto, saying, I do. Sensei, *2. What should I do? Sounding frantic, ignoring the warmth in his chest from being addressed with respect, Naruto told Chiriku how much power he should use and where. Test it out a few times on a wooden object, just don't set it on fire, Naruto said, looking at Chiriku's attempts. Too little, too much. That's it. Now do it. Shock his heart. Chiriku did so. Naruto checked the pulse, then said, again. On the second try, the heart started beating on its own. Naruto started chest compressions again until the man's heart was working as it should, adding a bit of healing chakra to make sure there would be no permanent damage to the patient's body, mainly the brain, feet, and hands. Having finished the treatment of this patient, Naruto went back to the younger patient. The man was just fine. His fever had dropped significantly and he was even waking up already. After taking care of the wounds with more paste and creams to make sure there would be little to no scarring and applying bandages again, Naruto left the man to check on the old man again. "Goji," Chiriku said when the younger patient groaned. Goji moved a bit, but Chiriku tried to keep him in place. "Chiriku-san, don't," Naruto said, moving further away. The vomit that soon stained Chiriku's robes proved that Naruto had made a wise decision. After that, Goji seemed to be in good health. Being trained in medical ninjutsu himself, the man said, "This is a miraculous level of healing. If I hadn't witnessed the difference in my state, I'd say this is impossible for anyone but Tsunade." Naruto felt his cheeks heat up, and Bawako's knowing smile made things worse. Such glowing praise in general, was something Naruto had only started getting used to relatively recently. Unfortunately, Chukaku wasn't in very good condition. Chiriku was visibly shaken, looking at the much older male solemnly. Naruto had set up a seal on Chukaku to warn Naruto and Goji in case the man's heart started beating too erratically or stopped. Yamato took aside Chiriku, telling him something about the next step. When they returned from their talk, Yamato said, "We are going to have to track down the kid monk, Sora. I have some torn cloth from the kid's robes, but I'm not especially good at tracking. Are you able to track him with your nose?" Turning to Bawako, Bawako nodded, but Naruto could tell that something was on her mind. Within moments, her eyes narrowed and her body flexed subtly, showing that she was focusing on the mission. Before setting off, Yamato said, "Listen, make sure to let me engage first if there's the slightest chance of hostility. You three are genin and I'm a jounin. Even if the one we're looking for is close to your age, you've noticed the damage he's caused, putting them into formation." Naruto couldn't even be annoyed by that, because the images Yamato's last sentence brought to his head were horrible and really vivid. "I hope the old monk is fine," Naruto thought to himself. The four of them kept on following the trail and, unfortunately, Naruto's chakra sense wasn't of much use. Either Kakashi hadn't told Yamato about it or Yamato had realized. "Naruto," Yamato said, his expression a bit more strained than usual. "Can you find chakra that doesn't belong? Does your chakra sense help? Bawako is a great tracker, but it's better for more of us to be prepared." After putting his finger on the ground, Naruto was able to be more precise, which made all the traces of Bijou chakra interfere less. The thickest concentration of Bijou chakra was. Naruto quickly used a water ninjutsu with a single-handed hand seal, aiming it at Bawako's back, a bit to the right, with enough force to spin her a bit and help her avoid red claws. Sighing in relief, Naruto sent a few shadow clones to cover Bawako. He heard grinding of teeth and a whimper from her, which made Naruto worry. Mito stepped in front of Bawako, too, which left Naruto with his back on them, covering the rear. He also scanned his surroundings with his chakra sense and otherwise, his heart beating really fast and his breathing a bit erratic. What Naruto truly wanted was to check on Bawako, but they were in the middle of a fight and one of his clones had already examined her enough to tell she only had moderate bruising. Apparently, the force Naruto had used in his ninjutsu had been just right. That wasn't enough to make him worry less, though. Crack! The sound of trees breaking made Naruto turn his head immediately. Something was off about the sound, but Naruto molded chakra in a specific way, activating his chakra sensing. His brain took a moment to process things. Then, Yamato-sensei has Mokuton? There was no time to think it over, as the malevolent chakra was getting stronger by the minute, reminding Naruto of what had happened with Shikaku. "Hihi, I've left an impression, haven't I?" Shikaku's voice said, making Naruto snap at him. To be exact, Naruto said, "Not the time, Shikaku," and focused on following the fight. A big, clawed ethereal hand attacked Naruto almost out of nowhere, but he had already managed to use Kawarimi, substitution/body replacement, to get out of the way. The next second, Yamato was there, forcing the berserker away with a Mokuton jutsu, confirming what Naruto had sensed earlier. Naruto decided to help, to get the mission out of the way and keep the girls safe, so he went through hand seals for an earth ninjutsu, Making the enemy's footing harder by using many earth spears, the berserker jumped on the sides of the earthen spears, destroying them easily, almost accidentally one after another, without providing a good opening. That's such bullshit. Now, you know how I felt when you and your girl sealed me again, Shikaku said in Naruto's mind. Pain went through Naruto's side, with Naruto having instinctively dodged enough not to be eviscerated but not enough to escape the slashing damage. He felt the by that point familiar pain of chakra burns. Ah! Ow! Ow, ow, ow! Naruto said, his every move sending burning agony through his left side. Unfortunately, chakra burns weren't exactly something one could get used to withstanding, or maybe they were worse than usual. I don't have time, he thought, forcing himself to move quickly, letting out little whimpers. A gust of wind from Mito made the berserker back off a few steps. But it wasn't Inu, BZZZZT, something that looked like a lightning spear from Galaxy Conflict, *3. A manga Naruto had read and liked, went through the berserker's torso, not even slowed down by the thick cloak of red chakra, the two tails too slow to block. Deciding not to gawk at Bawako's jutsu too much, Naruto retreated further, using the diagnostic mystical palm. Ow! Naruto shouted out. Apparently, my chakra burns are more serious than usual, Naruto thought to himself, gritting his teeth. He just curled up in the fetal position, a ways from the action. Unfortunately, that put pressure on his wound, so he moved back to a more open stance, unable to suppress a whimper. By the time Naruto felt well enough to move again, Yamato had caught the berserker with a Mokuton jutsu, but the wood was already starting to crack. Then, the man went through unfamiliar hand seals, causing Naruto to pay more attention. Kakuan nit ten sui shu, Yamato said, wooden pillars erupting from the ground. The wood covering the berserker glowed a bit, or was that Naruto's imagination? The vines that erupted from the pillars and snagged the berserker before it could fully break free were definitely there, though. Making sure to write down the hand seals and memorize the feel of Yamato's chakra first, Naruto walked closer to the man. Is it over, Yamato-sensei? Naruto asked him. It appears so, Naruto, Yamato said, nodding. To be certain, steer clear of the dash. There was no warning. Yamato's legs just sank into the ground, the likely Doton Jutsu stopping him for less than a second. It was enough. A massive force slammed into Naruto from the right before he could manage anything other than throwing a few shuriken behind him. Recognizing the force as a powerful blunt wind ninjutsu, Naruto managed to turn so that he was facing the direction he was going, but was also feet first, just in time to slam into a tree, absorbing much of the impact by bending his knees, then launching himself at another tree which bled off most of the rest of his momentum. Unfortunately, Naruto was too weakened to move as well as he could and would have normally, so he ended up with scratches on his arms and legs due to tree branches and other injuries in his legs from the impact of the landing. In fact, landing like that had made his feet feel like they had been hit by a lightning jutsu. He sensed for his teammates' chakra and kept his ears peeled, his feet still unstable from the pain. After a moment of thought, Naruto sent chakra into his ears, forgoing the use of his chakra sense. Whoever it was, they were very stealthy, too good at fooling chakra sensors for that to help. Following his ears, Naruto managed to reach the other's location. Much to his relief, everyone seemed more or less fine. On the other hand, their target wasn't there anymore. What happened? Naruto asked, and he could tell he wouldn't like the answer already. Bawako had an expression vicious enough to curdle milk on her face, causing Naruto to worry even more. Before Yamato could speak, she said, "What do you think? We've lost the target." Naruto looked from Bawako's furious face to Mito's perplexed expression to Yamato's more controlled reaction. Though for the first time, the man looked honestly worried. Yamato said, I was not expecting this type of opponent, I will freely admit." Who was it? Naruto asked, not getting why Yamato looked so unnerved and Mito so confused. Even Bawako's fury was more than he would have expected, even at such a major failure. Following his ears, Naruto managed to reach the other's location. Much to his relief, everyone seemed more or less fine. On the other hand, their target wasn't there anymore. What happened? Naruto asked, and he could tell he wouldn't like the answer already. Bawako had an expression vicious enough to curdle milk on her face, causing Naruto to worry even more. Before Yamato could speak, she said, "What do you think? We've lost the target." Naruto looked from Bawako's furious face to Mito's perplexed expression to Yamato's more controlled reaction. Though for the first time, the man looked honestly worried. Yamato said, I was not expecting this type of opponent. I will freely admit." Who was it?" Naruto asked, not getting why Yamato looked so unnerved and Mito so confused. Even Bawako's fury was more than he would have expected, even at such a major failure. They looked like ANBU, but they can't have been Konoha ANBU, Mito said, gesturing wildly. Their masks were like ANBU, but blank. Naruto went very still. Now, Bawako's anger makes sense. Shimura Danzo, Yamato sighed loud enough for Naruto to catch it, which was a first. "We're returning to the fire temple to report our failure. Then it's back to Konoha," he said, his tone showing he wouldn't budge. Not feeling like arguing, Naruto walked after Yamato. Even Mito didn't argue, though Naruto noticed her open and close her mouth more than once. As for Bawako, Naruto could tell she was quietly seething. Then again, Naruto wasn't exactly happy with how things had gone. He hated having to disappoint the monks. Besides, he didn't want a failed mission on his record, even for Konoha, especially due to Danzo's meddling. "And now I've gotten angry again," Naruto thought to himself, gritting his teeth and trying to tune out Shikaku's whispers. When the team reached the fire temple proper again, it was to a mournful atmosphere. With a sinking feeling in his gut, Naruto fished the alarm seal out of his jacket's pockets. Unfortunately, its paper had been shredded, along with much of the jacket itself, with less than half the seal intact. The good news was that the scroll housing the notebook with Kakuan Nit Ten Sueshu's hand seals was intact. "We have even more bad news to deliver. Damn it." Even Bawako's hand on Naruto's shoulder didn't help much. He tensed for a moment, but he didn't shrug it off. After much effort and guilt-tripping, Naruto had managed to persuade Yamato to delay the journey back to Konoha. He didn't have any funeral clothes with him, but according to Chiriku, the gesture meant a lot. Chiriku had proceeded to find funeral wear in Naruto's size for head monk Chikaku's funeral service. Naruto was trying his hardest to not think who they might have belonged to before. After Chikaku's body had been cremated and his ashes put into an ornate wooden jar, in Fire Temple tradition, Chiriku, who had been made the new head monk despite his age, asked for a word with Naruto. Dreading what the man might say, Naruto agreed, after looking at his sensei. Apparently Yamato trusted Chiriku enough to let him speak to Naruto in private, though Naruto could tell that Yamato was still near. Naruto was certainly not expecting Chiriku to bow low and say, "Thank you so much, Naruto-sensei. I wish I had a way to repay you adequately, but I failed," Naruto said very loudly. "If I had been faster and better dash." Without letting Naruto continue, Chiriku said, "As much as I would like to blame someone for Chikakadano's death, he was old and rather frail. He was over 100 years old. As it is, I am truly grateful to you for saving Goji and keeping Chikakadano alive long enough for him to wake up and say his goodbyes." Naruto was tearing up, despite himself. He hid his tears from Chiriku, as was his habit. "I wouldn't mind living here in the Fire Temple," Naruto thought to himself. That thought turned sour soon, though. Even though the Fire Temple was considered the closest thing to an independent entity and answered to none but the Fire Daimyo, Naruto wouldn't be able to trust them not to take him to Konoha. After all, wouldn't they want the son of the great hero, Namikaze Minato, to be home? On the other hand, I should keep my options open, Naruto's subconscious insisted. The journey back to Konoha had been without incident. Currently, Team 7 were in a sealed briefing room somewhere in the administrative building. I see, Kakashi said, his body language making him look relaxed, but Naruto wasn't fooled. Then, Kakashi said, "Unfortunately, there is not much we can do. I will try, but I doubt there is any proof. I am declaring the presence of those fake ANBU in your mission a B-ranked secret." A loud voice pierced the silence. "What? Kakashi? You're just going to sweep this under the carpet?" With a sinking feeling, Naruto realized it was Bawako who had just spoken. Kakashi was only staring at her and Yamato had frozen, so it fell to Naruto to calm her down. He put a hand on her shoulder, squeezing tighter when he saw her mouth open. I will let this disrespect, nearly insubordination pass, but there's a limit to my patience, Kakashi said, looking at Bawako without his usual laxity. Naruto felt Bawako tense, but before they got a chance to say anything, Yamato snapped out of whatever had affected him. He said, Bawako, I had not expected this of you. I know that you are often a bit disrespectful. You have crossed a line today, though. Hokage-sama, may I be in charge of her punishment? His dark eyes cold to the point of emotionlessness, making Naruto shiver. Kakashi only nodded, making Naruto grimace in sympathy and really glad he wasn't in her place. At the same time, Naruto had finally been dismissed by Yamato, who had decided to punish all three of them as a team with the most crappy and disgusting D-ranks, though Bawako was taking the brunt of it willingly. Apart from some dirty looks Mito had thrown Bawako, there was no infighting, but Naruto knew that Bawako didn't have a high opinion of Mito, either. Despite being tired, Naruto felt restless and agitated. Part of it was likely the full moon, but Naruto had another reason for feeling like that. Preferring to conserve his chakra, Naruto waited a few moments, having asked Katsuyu to summon him instead of reverse summoning himself to them. Before Naruto could finish his inner monologue, he was back in Shikatsu Forest, his aunt watching him with a sharp gaze. Naruto quickly took a certain notebook out of its storage scroll, checking the seals and doing his best to remember the feel of Yamato's chakra. Kakuan nit ten sui shu, Naruto said out loud, mainly because it was a bit more likely for a new jutsu to be successful like that. A very small wooden pillar came out of the ground. It lacked the wooden spikes of Yamato's version and felt a bit off. After over 2 hours of attempts, Naruto was getting more agitated, to the point he knew he'd be unable to sleep all night. Fortunately, if his estimations were right, he had reached Bawako's level of chakra reserves, maybe even pulled ahead. Unfortunately, she was still better at drawing out a lot of chakra fast, but Naruto was ahead in all other aspects of chakra control. Combined with Naruto's rate of chakra regeneration having skyrocketed from around 1,000 times faster than the average for a ninja to so insanely fast, it was comparable to the Fountain of Youth and Ho-Oh from some of his manga, and Naruto could practice until the sunrise or even longer. Naruto had managed to make just as many pillars as Yamato, at around the same size in the past few hours. He still felt that something was off with his usage of the jutsu, though. What am I doing wrong? Naruto thought to himself. I'm doing exactly the same dash. Suddenly, it hit Naruto. Yamato's Mokuton was far inferior, to the point Yamato felt strange to Naruto's senses. Yamato's chakra reserves, while not below par for a relatively strong jounin, were much lower than Naruto's. The man's chakra control was at most on par with Naruto's. In short, Naruto should have been trying to make his own version, not copying Yamato wholesale. Kakuan nit ten sui shu, Naruto said in his mind, going through the hand seals. The much sturdier-looking pillars felt more alive to Naruto's senses, but that wasn't enough. He knew he could do better. With help from Tsunade, Naruto started trying other hand seal combinations. The most promising ones seemed to be snake, bird, dog, tiger, snake. Before long, Naruto remembered the time he had modified the dog hand seal to purify water more easily, or, rather distill it, removing most extra parts. He told his aunt of his idea to modify the snake seal too, along with the jutsu. That led to his aunt smacking Naruto upside the head for his past carelessness. But she did give him leave to try the plan. In the end, after hundreds of wood clones and shadow clones trying the jutsu with different hand seals, Naruto thought up something else, then went through with it. He modified the rat seal, not just the snake seal. The latest sequence was bird, modified rat, tiger, modified snake. After a few more trials, a Naruto who was ready to collapse from the fatigue and lack of sleep ended up with the final product, at least for the time being. A semi-new jutsu, tiger, modified snake, bird and modified rat. Or rather, tiger would bird and Inyang as he had decided to name them. Tsunade was looking at Naruto with her mouth open. On the other hand, she said, Naruto, I think that you've inherited our uncle Tobarama's brilliance as a jutsu inventor. You haven't just made new jutsu. Distilling water on the fly and inventing new hand seals is less about making jutsu and more inventing new branches of jutsu. That you were able to do so quickly boggles the mind, even with clones. Then again, you have so much chakra and have gotten so good at functioning without rest that you sped up the process while Tobirama wasn't anywhere near as impressive as Grandpa chakra-wise, Tsunade said, making Naruto deflate a bit. His failures at reverse engineering Hiraishin came to Naruto's mind. He shouldn't be getting cocky, as he wasn't anywhere near the level he needed to be. Feeling as prepared as he would get, Naruto stepped in front of Shikaku's cage, his fatigue and lack of sleep not disappearing, but being muted while in his mind, or whatever this realm was. A crossroads, one's body, one's mind, one's chakra, and anything sealed in that person are able to meet, mostly as representations, according to Tsunade. Well, if it isn't the brat, Shikaku said, calmly enough to unnerve Naruto. Shikaku, Naruto said, facing up the bijou without the slightest tremble, even though he was nervous. Not that he would admit that to Shikaku. Then, with barely any hesitation, Naruto went through 4 hand seals, making 4 huge pillars in front of Shikaku's cage. Modern sacred jutsu, living sealing gate. Those pillars sprouted vines, which connected with one another, covering Shikaku's cage almost completely. Not without said bijou getting in a few words, though. I've heard of what your ancestor did to the other bijou, Senju, and you are not that different from him. He sold my brethren like so much cattle. You captured me to use my power, no matter how you might try to lie, to say it was necessary? Shikaku said, a serious note in his voice again. You will seek me out again someday when your power and skill fails you. I'll be waiting. As Naruto's jutsu worked, Shikaku's voice was getting fainter until Naruto could barely even sense his presence. He slapped a sealing tag on one of the wood pillars, making sure that the living gate would stay there as long as he had chakra. Naruto scratched his scalp and chin. He had managed to purge Shikaku's influence from his mind. Why then, didn't he feel like celebrating? Getting up from what felt like a week-long sleep, Naruto moved sluggishly to sit up, letting out a huge yawn. Before long, some clarity set in, though. He couldn't feel Shikaku at all, his new jutsu apparently doing its job. Naruto did some stretches under his aunt's watchful eye, feeling like a burden had left his shoulders. After a few chakra control exercises, Naruto concluded that his chakra reserves had dropped significantly, as had his chakra control. Even his rate of recovery had dropped a bit. He told his aunt about it immediately. What do you think is at fault, Auntie Tsunade? Naruto said, worried that his combat capabilities had dropped. Tsunade let out a grunt, then said, as I'm sure you've concluded already, the most likely reasons for your reserves dropping are you losing most of your access to the Ichibi's chakra and tying down a good portion of your chakra to maintain that jutsu. Oh well, considering your rate of chakra regeneration, that shouldn't bother you much. Speaking of which, the bijou chakra's potency must have increased your chakra regeneration rate, and now it's mostly back to normal. As for your chakra control, I think the reason is you haven't gotten used to the Ichibi's chakra, so the almost complete absence of it is throwing you off. Well, your chakra control worsening is a bit more alarming, but I'm fairly confident you will fix it soon. Naruto was sure he would be able to absorb Shikaku's chakra at some point in the future, but at this point, any attempts were more likely to metaphorically explode in his face. Still, going from having more chakra than Bawako to significantly less, again, isn't pleasant. Is the jutsu taking my chakra constantly because Shikaku is resisting or something? Naruto would also need to retrain himself in chakra control. A gentle voice Naruto recognized as Katsuyu said, Tsunade-sama, Naruto-san. A hawk has left a message for Naruto-san. Making sure to stay respectful and polite, as he had learned his lesson, Naruto took the message as quickly as he could, leaving for mission at 1,400 hours. Hurry. It wasn't signed, but Naruto would recognize Bawako's calligraphy anywhere. Realizing he had 25 minutes until that time, Naruto threw the scroll at his aunt and went through the hand seals of the reverse summoning jutsu. Apparently, Naruto wouldn't get the time to build up his chakra control again. Omake, I can see Uranus. The starting place being a sewer probably has to do with your seal being around your intestines. You start at an analog of your large intestine, then end up where the seal is in the control room of what amounts to a water purification facility. Maybe because purifying Shikaku's chakra is what the seal does and because the small intestine draws nutrients out of foods. Your chakra is the green water beneath you and in the pipes. The pipes representing your chakra circulatory system meet the seal at a certain tenketsu, one of the 8 gates, the gate of limit. The somewhat gloomy and dark ambience of the sewers is likely because of your lonely past, and the complete clarity of the green water signifies your clarity of purpose nowadays, Tsunade said, barely pausing to breathe. To know 3 questions. 1. What happens if I open the gate of limit using the 8 gates formation? 2. How did you manage to get all that from just what I told you? I have no idea about the first. As for your second question, you'll get there someday if you sharpen your mind and study the medical field, including psychology, enough. You said you had a third question, though, his aunt said. Well, it's a silly question, Naruto told her. No question is silly, if asked with the proper mindset, Tsunade said, smiling a little bit. Naruto said, if I'm starting somewhere around the large intestine, does that mean the entry point is my dash? Tsunade sighed, then rubbed her forehead and temples, saying, yeah, there's metaphor and then there's taking it too far. Kakashi, a scroll in hand, said, the mission for Team 7 is to find a certain unit of Uzumaki survivors and persuade them to come live in Konoha. Because of the sensitive nature of this mission and its position, it's classified as a B rank, but it's unlikely for combat to break out. Then threw the mission scroll at Yamato. He also threw another scroll at the younger man, maybe one containing a message like the one for Baki last time. What he didn't say was that Mito was being used as a lure because she was obviously an Uzumaki descendant. Naruto wasn't sure if Mito had realized that, but he wouldn't be surprised either way. It was also a mission he could use to recruit people for his future village, if he could get away with sabotaging a B-ranked mission. A look from Bawako showed her to be on the same page. Apparently, the band of Uzumaki survivors had been last seen somewhere in the south of the recently renamed Land of Sound. The team set out at great speed through the trees. Either it's really urgent or Yamato has realized we don't need to be coddled so much. Either way, Yamato's teaching style was growing on Naruto. If Kakashi had been teaching them at a frantic pace, maybe he had expected he wouldn't stay their teacher for long for whatever reason, and Tsunade was the sadistic trickster type of mentor. Yamato just got it. He had started out slow, but the man had a way with words. Some parts of chakra theory Naruto had missed, mostly basics, Yamato had noticed very quickly and been able to cover in a way that Naruto could easily get. Far better than Tsunade and Kakashi, Yamato was a natural tutor. He knew how to explain things in depth, to leave his student to figure things out on their own sometimes and which student needed which approach at a given time. Naruto was using their movement through trees to sharpen his chakra control again. As a result, he would fumble the jumps a lot. At first, his falls would make Mito laugh, but she stopped laughing after the 3rd time and was likely worried enough to speak up. The 6th time or so Naruto fumbled his jump. Yamato said, Naruto, has your chakra control slipped? Or are you trying something new? Without stopping moving, beating Mito to the punch, Naruto said, grimacing, I'm getting the hang of it again, Yamato-sensei. There might be something off with my chakra's flow, or maybe it's the fatigue. Telling a partial truth, Yamato said, do you think you are well enough to continue? With his usual calm, pretending to think it over, Naruto said, yeah, I'm pretty sure it's temporary. I got examined by a medicnine even better than me. I just got to improve the normal way again. After a small pause, as Naruto had expected, he got less and less clumsy as they went on until, to even most ninjas, there would be little to no difference from how he had been at the end of the last mission. Unfortunately, he needed more practice to get back to normal. Naruto needed a lot more chakra manipulation training, if his control could be shaken so easily. He was sure that was what Tsunade would tell him after the mission. He winced, imagining what kind of training she would have Naruto do to make him able to control his chakra, no matter what. Sensei, Mito said, sounding impatient. How far is the Land of Sound? We should be there before nightfall, even with a rest stop, Yamato said, replying to Mito's question. If Yamato was right, the Land of Sound was actually very close. It had taken an entire day, plus several hours, for them to get to the border between the Land of Rivers and the Land of Wind, starting from Konoha in an older mission. Bawako had gotten incredibly good at not wasting her physical stamina. something about practicing her singing, even if Naruto didn't get what that had to do with anything. As a jounin, Yamato was already very good at that. So, for the first time, it was Mito who had gotten tired first, despite Naruto having had his abilities set back. His chakra regeneration and physical stamina were still way better than they had been before the Land of Wind. The lack of Shikaku's chakra wasn't as big a setback as he had thought. The three of them were seated on some boulders, with Yamato having gone a bit farther away to do something. Naruto started looking around, but his eyes stopped on Mito for a bit, who was on the closest boulder. Her breathing looked steady already. In fact, she looked more rested than Bawako. Naruto hadn't noticed immediately, but the atmosphere had gotten more humid. The land of sound and places near it had damp weather, apparently. Naruto's eyes went back to Mito and met her gaze. She examined Naruto for a moment, then said, "Naruto, are you all better now? You having chakra control so bad is strange." "Yeah," Naruto said, smiling. "Auntie will make sure I'm worse before I'm better, but I'm gonna be better than ever." Mito grimaced. She then said, "Don't try to fake smiles like that. It makes you look creepy." "All my smiles are like that," Naruto said, grinning lightly. "Much better," Mito said, a small smile on her face. "You were overacting before," making Naruto wonder just why she knew so well how to fake a smile. "Anyway, who's this anti-person?" Naruto froze in place. He said, "Oops, I've forgotten to introduce the two of you. She's Dad's biological aunt." Mito squinted while looking at Naruto. She said, "That's the first I hear of an aunt. How sure are you?" Naruto thought it over for a bit. How should I phrase it? Then he said, "I had reason to believe I was related to her, but neither of us knew we were also related to Dad. She discovered it with some help from blood tests and family resemblance." Mito sighed. She said, "I mean, no offense to this person, but are you sure she's not tricking you? I mean, lots of people try to use my fame." "She's famous, too," Naruto said, breathing slowly, trying not to snap at Mito. "Auntie Tsunade is very well known." After a few moments of stillness, Mito's eyes bugged out. She said, "Pervy Sage's teammate? The most beautiful woman in the world. Best medic, best knockers, the strongest kunoichi and all that." Naruto grimaced. He said, "Ugh, yes, she's the one." "Do you have to say it like that, though?" Rolling her eyes, Mito said, "Oh, come on. You try being Pervy Sage's apprentice and not getting stuck with some of his habits." Not peeping, though, of course. Letting out a laugh despite himself, Naruto said, "Does that mean Jiraiya-sama spies on naked women?" Mito's words sounding like a hilarious joke. Seeing Mito's flat stare, Naruto stayed quiet for a moment, then said, "Wait, really?" His eyes bugging out. He hadn't expected that. "So all the times Auntie Tsunade called him a pervert, that's what she meant? I figured he just kept flirting with her in a pervy way." When Tsunade had been teaching Naruto Tuten, Transparent Escape, an invisibility jutsu, she had made a comment about Jiraiya having made it for another sort of spy work, but it had flown over Naruto's head. In hindsight, it was kind of obvious. Mito sighed out loud. She said, "You get used to his antics. Don't worry, he hasn't ever touched anyone without their say-so. And he avoids spying on anyone who isn't in her late teens and older." That did relieve Naruto. He then said, "Say, Mito, do you have a seal I can use to train my chakra control at difficult times? Something that makes it harder to manipulate it." Mito put her hand under her chin, then said, "Well, there's the 5-element seal, but that's not going to be enough if your chakra control can return to almost normal so fast. Besides, it can have side effects if you keep it for longer than a month or so. Maybe the dual gate seal or the 3-season seal? After the mission, of course," Mito said, stretching a bit. "Yeah, putting seals like that on me during a mission wouldn't be a good idea," Naruto admitted. "Just so I know, will the 3-season seal interfere with an even-numbered seal I have on me?" Mito's eyebrows climbed up. She said, "As long as both are stacked correctly, there should be no problems." Naruto thought it over. He said, "Stacking is how seals in 3 dimensions are folded into 2, right?" Mito nodded, saying, "Yeah, but it's not just 3 dimensions. Dad's version of Hration is supposed to have needed a lot of math that, well, there's a reason Pervy Sage sometimes calls him a mad genius. He did something with multiple dimensions and folding space and time, something that Pervy Sage compared to something called string theory he had seen in Orochimaru's notes. While his Hration left most of the calculations and chakra cost to the jutsu formula, the user still needs to do some complex calculations in their mind on the fly. There might be some complex numbers mixed in there, too. Something about false space being best represented by imaginary numbers. Naruto was slowly realizing that Mito was a lot smarter than she usually let on. Most of the information he had already known from Tobirama's and the other Mito's books, but his sister's grades in math during the academy had been not exactly mediocre, but barely in the top 5. I rambled on, Mito said, blushing in embarrassment. When I'm talking about ceiling theory, I sometimes get carried away. Mito, Naruto said, furrowing his brows. How come you got low grades in math during the academy? Ugh, Mito said, grimacing. That was kiddie stuff. I had known everything we learned about math in the academy from when I was 4. I got bored in the academy every time. I can relate. I didn't start learning so early, but I can really relate, Naruto said and let out a chuckle, which gradually turned into an open-mouthed, loud laugh. Mito laughed along, goading Naruto on, which meant they kept laughing until Naruto was in tears. When Naruto looked around again, he noticed Bawako had left the boulder she had been on. I should go and find her. Before Naruto could put his thought into action, he realized that Bawako was approaching, as was Yamato. Yamato said, all rested, waiting for their nods before setting off again, at a slow pace. Naruto was about to ask why Yamato wasn't letting them go fast, but was distracted by what sounded like a waterfall. Not long after that, the 4 of them landed on the ground at the edge of the forest, to a view that was breathtaking. Beneath them, to the side, was a cliff leading to a lake. Up front was the waterfall he had heard earlier, leading to the same lake. With a more careful look, Naruto noticed that the valley the lake was a part of had only large trees. The largest ones were kind of foamy. They were Hashirama trees. There was something strange about the valley, beyond the statues on both sides of the waterfall. A muttered Madara from Bawako, though it sounded more like a growl, made Naruto realize where they were. The Valley of the End. Walking on water at a point the current wasn't so strong. Along with his teammates, Naruto thought over the clues. It was said that Madara and Hashirama had rearranged the landscape, and considering what he was seeing and generally sensing, that wasn't an exaggeration. Having left behind the Valley of the End, which was just before the border hours earlier, Bawako had been looking for traces of the Uzumaki clan survivors, her already foul mood getting worse and worse. I swear, she thought to herself, if they weren't related to Naruto, I'd take my anger out on the bastards. There was nothing of note around the cave on her left, so that left her with wait. There's nothing of note in the cave. Suspicious, there's nothing of note there. Sharingan, the effect of the genjutsu, or whatever it was, had been weakened greatly. Bawako ignored the strange looks from the others, though Naruto looked like he had come to a realization. About time, before Bawako, Naruto, or the others could react further, the rocks at the cave entrance rearranged themselves. To Bawako's eyes, the whole thing seemed almost incomprehensible, Sharingan or not. Almost. Fortunately, she was familiar with the Uzumaki sealing style, even if that particular trick wasn't something she had known. Her stomach felt like it was about to come out of her mouth, despite her not being prone to nausea. Yamato was the first one, after Bawako, to shake himself out of the stupor they were in. Wait, the Sharingan, Bawako thought to herself, switching off her bloodline and hoping Yamato hadn't gotten a glimpse. Stay behind me and be alert, Yamato said in an urgent-sounding tone, walking towards the much bigger than before opening of the cave. His scent was weaker and more forest-like than before somehow, though. That sounds familiar. After several seconds of nothing, Bawako managed to literally sniff out an adult female heading towards them, so she told Yamato. True to what Bawako had expected, a red-headed woman walked out of the cave. She appeared to be in her mid to late 20s and was of average height for an adult woman. Most importantly, her scent made Bawako realize that the woman was powerful, and definitely not one to be trifled with. The woman's reddish-brown eyes assessed them in a way that made Bawako's heart rate pick up, reminding her of the way Itachi would usually look at most Uchiha clan members, the year before his slaughter of the clan, only even colder. She finally spoke, voice low-pitched for a woman, saying, "Welcome to our humble abode. What is it that brings you here, Konoha Shinobi?" Her expression not betraying anything other than the fact she was used to being obeyed. Something was off about her, though, and Bawako would stay on guard. Yamato stepped forward, saying, "I am a jounin of Konoha, called Yamato, and these are my students. I'm Mito. I'll be in your care," Mito said, stepping forward, making the woman's eyes widen, then narrow. "Naruto," Naruto said, pointing to his chest with his palm. The red-headed woman's gaze sharpened further when she heard his name, putting Bawako on alert. Stepping forth in a way that brought her closer to Naruto, Bawako said, "My name is Bawako. What is yours?" Bawako said, with calculated politeness, bowing enough to be comfortably in the polite zone but not nearly deeply enough to show subservience. The unknown woman said, "My name is Korin," smirking at Bawako for a moment. "Do you see, Yamato-san? This one is polite, unlike some who might have sent a clone for their introduction." Making a single-handed hand seal, Bawako did the same and let air fill her lungs at the same time. Stalagmites similar to the ones Naruto tended to use in his Doryuso jutsu rose out of the ground, impaling Yamato's legs and feet and hiding Korin from view. Bawako jumped up high, holding her breath, then fired off her Katan ninjutsu towards the place Korin's scent was coming from in multiple spheres, saying, "How Senka no Jutsu?" in her mind. A wave of water swept Bawako aside, also snuffing out Bawako's jutsu. For a few moments, she was unable to tell up from down, but fortunately, with a combination of water walking and tree climbing, she managed to hold on and go up a tree to save herself. That Suetun ninjutsu reminded her of Naruto's attacks, except executed with Shizen's grace and Tsunade's level of effectiveness, efficiency, and skill. Whether by luck or design, Bawako and the surroundings were too drenched to use her lightning ninjutsu without risking hurting Naruto and the others' dash, though she made sure to at least somewhat dry up herself using fire style. "Wait," Bawako thought to herself. "Where is Naruto?" Gritting her teeth. No, not again," Bawako said in her mind. His ever-present scent was nowhere to be found, more obvious than ever in its absence. Yamato's scent was also nowhere. No. It was coming from a tree? As for Mito, Bawako couldn't find a scent either, but she had more pressing things to do. Bawako turned her back on where she thought Yamato was and activated her Sharingan, immediately focusing on Naruto's last position. Rapidly disappearing traces of chakra were going toward the west. Bawako racked her mind for what was there. Unfortunately, she hadn't bothered to fully memorize a world map. Waterfall country with the waterfall hidden village is that way, right? There's a country between rice and waterfall, but what is its name? After switching off her Sharingan, Bawako went to report her findings to Yamato, though she made sure to attribute them to her nose only. Speaking of which, Mito was still around. Her scent had just been temporarily drowned out. Once he had deigned to show himself and hear Bawako out, Yamato looked truly troubled. He said, "This is above our pay grade. We need reinforcements." Bawako's whole body twitched, but Yamato's next words and actions were, at least, not idiocy. He made another wood clone and sent it for reinforcements, then said, "Let's go after them." His expression grave. As for Mito, she wasn't talking, but the rare snarl-like expression on her face was saying enough. While they were moving, Yamato briefed them on their next destination. "We're heading west towards the Land of Wastes, a place that is, well, dead. It's a wasteland that puts the furthest reaches of the Land of Wind Desert to shame, even though it's not hot. I can't put it in words, but for as long as history remembers, the place has been like that," Yamato said tremulously, the tone of his voice showing more apprehension than ever. The farther they ran, the more Bawako got just what Yamato had meant. The flora was getting less frequent. What little there was looked just like cacti. There was no difference to Bawako's naked eye from those in the desert of the Land of Wind. Even her nose was hard-pressed to detect differences, past the fact there was some kind of difference. And yet, the plant's mere presence unsettled Biwako deeply. She pointed the way for Yamato and Mito to follow. There were water sources, but they were murky with something. It wasn't anything she recognized. After no more than an hour navigating a place without life, even decay, the smell of microbes' waste products was obvious in its absence. According to their timepieces, they arrived at another cave entrance. Biwako considered commenting on that mockingly, but she wasn't in the mood for that after what felt like an eternity stepping on soil that wasn't, and passing by dead water and intact buildings, even though they were supposedly ancient. The cave's entrance wasn't even protected by seals. Biwako made sure to check using her Sharingan, as discreetly as possible. Yamato signed for them not to speak. Then they entered, with Biwako providing everyone with lit torches. Some cave drawings depicting what looked like rabbits and people living in harmony should have calmed Biwako down. Instead, she only felt more unsettled than ever. Mito, who should have been gushing about how adorable those bunnies were, was silent and looked ready to throw projectiles with exploding tags at anything that moved. The next set of drawings showed the rabbits feasting alongside the people, but something about those images nagged at Biwako's mind. Aren't rabbits herbivores normally? Mito said in a whisper, apparently forgetting Yamato's orders. Biwako had been about to chide Mito when she did a double take. She didn't see any animals other than rabbits in the drawings, but the number of humans had significantly decreased from the previous drawings to the latest. Biwako barely managed to keep her gags from turning into puking. While her nose was less likely than most to get her to gag, the overall ambience of the place along with those drawings had affected her more than she'd ever admit. Finally, the three of them reached a large chamber, which stank horribly, making Biwako almost retch again. She hadn't even detected the smell until she had stepped foot inside. It smelled like something had died, only somehow worse. The red-headed woman's scent was present, as was Naruto's, but they were nowhere to be seen, and the scent trail stopped there. Maybe using the Sharingan is necessary here, Biwako thought to herself, then activated her bloodline limit, not hesitating further. Looking around, Biwako noted that everything looked so much more dull than usual, and it wasn't just the darkness. Biwako had had less trouble seeing in darkness in the past. It was more like everything was covered by mist or a film of sticky material, except not. Wind had come out of nowhere and blown out the torches. Biwako nearly started channeling fire-style chakra into her hand, but she realized it would ruin her night vision at the last moment. Her Sharingan and nose would have to be enough. She turned around, only to find herself alone in the cave's chamber. No trace of Yamato or Mito left to her senses. Her breathing sped up despite herself. She looked all around for anything that might have attacked them. "You are searching in vain, kid," a voice said, just before Biwako peppered the place it was coming from with multiple senbon made of lightning-style chakra, leaving traces of white liquid Biwako didn't want to know the origin of. Fortunately, though, Biwako's eyes had managed to catch a glimpse at a part of the chamber which led somewhere other than back to where they had come. Shaking off her unexpectedly strong fear, she paused just long enough to make a shadow clone and sent it ahead of her, following along, down a literal hatch made of bronze. Biwako shivered, and not just in fear. The land of wastes apparently had unchanging, tolerable weather all year long, for a given value of tolerable. Unfortunately, that had gone out of the window in this place. It was getting colder and colder, and even the smell was worsening, though it had been gradual enough that Biwako hadn't noticed immediately. Creaking sounds, then. Biwako jumped a bit in place, after hearing that deafening sound. That sounded like something metallic dropping, like that time I dropped a metal pan on the floor, only much, much louder. The hatch. No matter how much Biwako wanted to check, she refrained from sending another clone, as she would likely need all of her chakra. The air was getting heavier and, combined with the overpowering, sickening smell, it was making Biwako's breathing harder. If it hadn't been for all the exercises she regularly went through to improve her singing, she might have had to waste chakra to clear the air or help along her lungs. Just like that, Biwako realized. Most of the setup was a means of intimidating, weakening, delaying, and splitting up anyone trying to enter. She stopped her clone with a mental command, then gave said clone new instructions in the form of sign language. A cloaking genjutsu and careful movement took care of the rest of the next step in her plan. Biwako's shadow clone reached a dead end, with the only apparent solution of jumping down a chasm or using the tree climbing exercise. Probably a trap. Giving the clone some rope, she had it start climbing down, Biwako herself guarding the rope to make sure nothing and nobody would attack it. Her clone was soon harassed by a huge number of bats, but Biwako herself struck them down with projectiles, in such a way that it could be mistaken for a trap activated by the clone, with help from her bracelet imbued with the seals of Reiko Kenka. So far, apart from the minimal nowadays drain of her Sharingan and Genjutsu and the even more minimal drain of unsealing all those weapons, Biwako had only spent chakra on the single shadow clone and her earlier Hell Senbon. As soon as the shadow clone hit the ground, it sent a pulse of chakra that would seem like a poor attempt at sensing chakra to most, but it was actually a signal. This particular signal was supposed to signify there were enemies. As such, Biwako would wait until the clone had been attacked. Biwako landed on the ground, chakra practically as full as when she had been created. She faked fatigue and being low on chakra, her moves being as sluggish as she could make them without overacting. When she noticed the redhead in her way, her eyes narrowed. She didn't resist much when the woman tied her up with ninja wire. Soon, the two of them arrived at a better ventilated chamber. The stench was still going strong, though. "I see you've brought the girl," a voice that sounded like something out of nightmares said. "I have," the woman said, the tone of her voice somehow different than earlier. "It's enough, isn't it? I've done your dirty work. Now, it's time to keep your end of the bargain. Why so hasty? I'm gonna cry. Korin-san doesn't like us," the person said, in two different voices. Biwako was facing downwards, so she couldn't see whoever it was, but she was confident both voices had come from the same place. "I have one more task for you, and then I'll leave your pack of refugees alone and alive," the first voice said, not fazed at all. So the woman Korin had been coerced against her will? "We can use this," Biwako thought to herself. Before she could do anything, she noticed some vines wrap around her calves and shins. Then, Biwako had known she had been discovered even before the clone's brutal demise via severed legs. But she didn't bother to do anything but prepare herself for a fight. The creature that appeared in front of her, coming out of the ground, looked just peculiar. Half black, half white and all ugly. "Hey man, can we get this over with? This place gives me the creeps," the creature said, but only one half of its mouth moved. "Patience, Zetsu," the other voice said. "This place is truly terrible, yes, but we have a job to dash." "Goenka," Biwako said in her mind, joining her hands together slowly, then going through two more hand seals as fast as she could without fumbling them. Spitting out several balls of fire, Biwako jumped to the chamber's ceiling, not even bothering to check if that thing had been killed before moving on to Korin. The whooshing sound that signified the fireball's expansion into a huge conflagration hadn't bothered Biwako, and neither did the serious lack of breathable air, though that was mostly due to her only futon ninjutsu, the deranked air filter. The stench had become stronger than ever, but that was irrelevant. Korin was standing before a bound and gagged Naruto. Just like that, Biwako didn't care anymore, just casting genjutsu after genjutsu on the woman. Without saying a word, Korin drew a kunai, then slashed at Naruto. Biwako screamed out, but brought herself under control when she noticed the woman had only cut through the wire and ropes keeping Naruto bound. Still, she was itching to attack the bitch that had dared. "No, I need to remain rational." Naruto, bless his quick thinking, had already stolen Korin's kunai with a strike at her wrist and jumped to Korin's flank, forcing the woman to keep her eyes on two opponents. Finally, Naruto thought to himself, coughing and rubbing the sore parts of his body, "I hate being tied up." Unfortunately, Naruto's dysphoria hadn't left with the wire and ropes. He didn't know what jutsu to use either. The conditions were terrible for water and wind ninjutsu, with the dryness and lack of wind. Fortunately, there wasn't so much smoke around anymore. Punching the disgusting crap that passed for soil, Naruto thought, when in doubt, stick to the basics. The very moment Korin's balance was disrupted by the quake that followed. A line of lightning that looked like a spear made of electricity shot from Biwako's hand through the side of Korin's ribs and out the opposite side of her back. Naruto knew that jutsu as Jigakuizo, Hell-Sharp Spear. Noticing that Korin's chakra had shifted to another position, Naruto formed his Density Hand Seal, a modified one based on the bird seal, one he had invented in the process of improving his living sealing gate murmuring, Daicho Doryuso, Mega Earth Flow Spears, forming a field of spiky death at Korin's new position and around it. While this A-ranked variation of Earth Flow Spears was something Naruto had made to skewer dozens of enemies, he didn't use it that way against Korin, for obvious reasons. Other than its widespread area of effect, the major advantage it had over its C-ranked parent jutsu was the fact that it was formed faster and, most importantly, it moved faster. Much, much faster. At just the right time, Bawako rained down balls of fire from above, but Korin's chakra was still in position after the attacks, surrounded by water. The water prison jutsu. Naruto knew, right then and there, that Korin's main element was water, so he unsealed his gourd, made of brass on the outside, platinum on the inside and wood in between, to fight fire with fire. When the rubble settled, there was a bottle on Korin's hip that hadn't been there before. Bawako's fire style wouldn't be any good in this fight anymore anyway, so Naruto might as well. He took control over Korin's leftover water at the same time Bawako used her Hell Senbon. Well, she pushed aside the Senbon made of electricity, probably with wind style, but she didn't get out of the attack unscathed. Her hair sticking up in one side and still straight in the other, and her steps clumsier. Something strange was going on with Naruto, though. He was already tiring out. Had the enemies done something to him? He had also felt like his emotions were muted and he had no motivation to do anything for most of his captivity and still did. He recognized that as depression from his medical studies and from his time in orphanages. Maybe something targeting my lungs, then as the lungs having issues can cause that feeling. Apart from a lack of clean air around, though, everything was fine with his lungs. With Naruto's continued dysphoria and his chakra reserves not filling up anywhere near as fast as usual, it probably was something about their surroundings. It's not claustrophobia, Naruto mused to himself. This feels like the air is too thin and not just because we're in a cavern. That I was used to something being there and now it's not. I miss it, without realizing what it is. Almost as if they had their own mind, Naruto's hands and mouth had done the sequence for the summoning jutsu. He slammed his right onto the ground, making a small part of Katsuyu appear in smoke. Thankful to Bawako for covering while Naruto was summoning but deciding to focus on other things, Naruto was surprised when Katsuyu let out a long whine. Keeping his eyes on Korin and disrupting her control over water, Naruto said, "Katsu-sama, do you know why this place feels so strange?" Katsuyu let out another whine, then said, "Is this the land of wastes, Naruto-kun? There is a truly minuscule amount of natural energy here, and even that feels corrupted." Naruto's thoughts went back to mentions of natural energy and sage mode in the Senju clan's library and Katsuyu's lectures, though those parts had been side notes more than anything. I should look into those things more thoroughly later. Evading hundreds of water needles by jumping, Naruto altered his trajectory by slapping Bawako's hand at just the right time, to keep each other from being run through by sharpened stones. This isn't working, Naruto thought to himself. Apparently, lack of natural energy weakens me and my regeneration. I even feel uncomfortable in my own skin, like I usually do in crowds of Konoha citizens. Naruto landed shit. Korin was there already and Naruto had to avoid deceptively strong punches, which shattered more than one stalactite and dispelled Katsu. Considering how close Korin was, Bawako wouldn't be able to provide ranged support. By stomping on the ground, Naruto forced Korin to jump, but he knew that wasn't enough to provide a good opening. What it was an opportunity for him to draw his weapon. For the first time in the fight, Korin was at a disadvantage, having to avoid shuriken charged with fire-style chakra in what Naruto recognized as House Senketsu, while being kept at bay due to Naruto's staff. Naruto had gotten in a lot of glancing blows on the enemy with the staff so far, but 0 full contact ones. Sideways towards her left temple, push-off stalagmite and uppercut toward shit. Korin had predicted his move and stopped the staff's momentum with a stamp kick. She pushed off the staff. Is that an exploding tag? Is she crazy? Naruto signed with his left hand and threw his staff at Korin with great force with his right, pushing it with a wind ninjutsu in the process, trusting Bawako to get away in time. Boom! The explosive part was weaker than it should have been thanks to the way Naruto had used his wind jutsu. But the fiery part was way stronger, making Korin, oh crap, an earth clone. She made one and substituted with it. I didn't even notice, Naruto grimaced, holding his ears. He knew that Bawako wouldn't last long in a one-on-one against Korin, especially if the lightning jutsu from before had run its course, but he was pretty much tuckered out. His chakra had dropped to near chakra exhaustion levels and it wasn't refilling anywhere near fast enough to save them. Of course, he started throwing shuriken and kunai at the woman, ignoring the pain in his ears, but he wasn't as good at that as Bawako, and he couldn't use shuriken Kagebunshin for obvious reasons. Maybe I shouldn't have refused Bawako's offer to make me a bracelet like hers, but I have my pride. Damn it. I thought that when Auntie Tsunade would teach me the jutsu, I wouldn't need Reiko Kenka, but even now that I know it, I'm all but useless here, Naruto thought to himself. Korin tied up both Naruto and Bawako using ninja wire, and for some reason, Mito and Yamato were still nowhere to be found. She then said, "So, have you gotten what you wanted yet?" To seeming thin air. To Naruto's surprise, a creature that was half completely black, half completely white emerged from a small boulder. That wasn't earth-style. If anything, it feels more like a wood-style jutsu adapted for stone. Naruto mused to himself. Even the mayfly jutsu feels wrong in this place. Shut up. We've gotten what we came here for, so you may let them go, Korin. Alive and unharmed, preferably. I will call for you when I have another assignment, the creature said, in voices Naruto had heard next to his ear earlier, when Korin had held again earlier. The monstrous levels of hatred-charged chakra made Naruto twitch. Ouch. My shoulder. His shoulder was bleeding from a rather deep cut caused by the wire, the pain becoming more obvious with every second that passed. His breath wasn't constricted significantly the way he was bound, but having been out of breath to begin with, he was feeling even more tired. No, need to stay awake. This was meant to be the last assignment, Korin said, with the bloodlust and power coming from her showing Naruto she hadn't been fighting at her fullest earlier. For a few seconds, the creature said nothing, but the rumbling sound that was coming from it was very creepy. Are they laughing? That was a nice one, Korin. You are forgetting your place, though. You know fully well that I can turn your band of survivors into so many non-survivors. Goodbye for now. See ya. The squelching sound of something solid being turned into a paste came next, with Naruto being showered with white liquid. Gah! It's gotten in my mouth. Bleck. Naruto started gagging. Then he puked, dropping on all fours. The only sounds were retching from him and sobs that were coming from Korin. Curious as to what had caused that and realizing that she had freed him and Bawako from their bonds, he said, "Hey lady, what's wrong? What's wrong? What's wrong? I failed to kill the black half, that's what is wrong. I might as well have killed my entire branch of the clan myself. Some leader I am," Korin said, in between sobs, with the clarity brought on by more oxygen, passable recovery in his chakra levels as well as the deranked air filter. Naruto realized just how similar to a plant that creature had been, including its chakra and that white paste. He bandaged his shoulder with one hand, absently noting that it had reached the muscle but there was no nerve damage. Your sensei and other teammate are fine, by the way, Korin said, making Naruto's tense muscles relax a bit. He let out a sigh, then turned to Bawako, surprised that she hadn't spoken, only to notice that her right arm had been cut to the bone and beyond. Naruto moved and examined her, realizing it wasn't a fatal wound. Unfortunately, there was a chance Bawako would lose some motor function or even her arm for good, with how little chakra Naruto had left. Taking a deep breath, Naruto worked on Bawako, including mundane work like a transfusion and the mystical palm both, until he noticed someone else's arm in front of him. Knowing about the Uzumaki clan's abilities, he barely hesitated before biting down, ignoring the metallic taste of blood. Chakra significantly restored, he used the mystical palm more extensively to fix Bawako's arm fully. Finally, Naruto made Bawako swallow a blood pill to encourage blood replenishment and give her some nutrients and liquids. Korin was nowhere to be found, but there was a scroll in Naruto's jacket pocket that hadn't been there before. He checked it for traps and gave it a quick read. That creature has plans unknown, but whatever they might be, they can't be good. It wanted to do to or check something about you two in particular, so be vigilant. If you two ever need my help, call upon me with this seal. I owe you. Just don't make me join Konoha, K. Naruto scoffed, but he used the reverse summoning jutsu carefully, to not make it obvious, to send the hastily written letter to Katsuyu, with a small note of his own attached, then examined Biwako again. There was a chance Naruto would be able to recruit Korin, so he wouldn't risk Yamato getting wind of the letter. As if Naruto's thoughts had alerted him, Yamato walked into the chamber. Naruto, is Biwako all right? Yeah, though she'll probably have a very sore arm and maybe a nasty headache too, when she wakes up. What about Mito? Naruto told the man, checking Biwako's vitals and injury again, a bit too anxious about her health to stop repeatedly doing so. Yamato talked into a headset made of wood? No, it was a part of him. Would clone? I have my own ways to communicate between clones, but Yamato's seems to be more refined. Naruto mused to himself. That last thought made Naruto grimace. He had thought Yamato's Mokuton was completely inferior, but the man was better than Naruto had given him credit for. Or maybe Naruto himself was falling behind. Carrying a stirring Biwako, Naruto met up with Mito and the real Yamato, with the latter holding back the former to keep her from tackle-hugging Naruto. As soon as Biwako got back some awareness, she told Naruto to let her walk rather strongly. Naruto wouldn't hear of it and made sure she had drunk some water and eaten some dark chocolate before he let go of her. Biwako murmured something about Naruto becoming a bossy medic too. What was that? Naruto said firmly, then had her check her shoulder's range of motion, relieved by the fact it seemed like her dexterity in that arm was steadily coming back. Naruto was still sulking because Yamato had shot down his suggestion to torch that cavern with all the explosives, though the man had been, rather transparently, tempted to agree. What's that creature's agenda, though? I doubt we've seen the last of it. Biwako thought to herself and rolled her shoulder again, cursing her inability to control her body and that damn high-grade ninja wire. B-ranked mission, track down a certain band of Uzumaki clan survivors and persuade them to become permanent residents of Konoha. Failed, Kakashi said, but if anything, he sounded proud. Unfortunately, Naruto felt like a failure. There had been no trace of the Uzumaki survivors in and around the cavern in the Land of Sound on their return trip, even though there had been a Hyuga among their reinforcements. While that could mean they had escaped, Naruto suspected that most of the Uzumaki were dead or would be soon. Rest? Team 7. You have a week off duty to relax and 2 more until it's time for your next mission. Don't forget to rest plenty, though, Kakashi said, dismissing them. Auntie Tsunade, Naruto said, is there any way to be ready for all terrains? In the Land of Wind against Gaara, with his field advantage, we survived out of luck in large part. Now, in the Land of Wastes, I wasn't able to use most of my skills, which would have gotten all of us killed if the opponents had wanted us dead. Welcome to live combat, kid. Element specialists end up in unfavorable terrains, too, and that often means their death, Tsunade said. What helps you in all places is better taijutsu, more refined chakra control and more chakra to be able to make all your jutsu strong even in bad conditions, greater dodging capabilities. The basics in general. Naruto had hoped for some other answer, like a way to cause rain when he wanted to, but reality didn't work that way, or did it? Unbidden, a text of Tobirama's came to mind. Naruto looked for it in his collection, finding the scroll almost immediately. Unfortunately, it took him minutes before he found the passage, but he managed it. Changing the weather in a major way is possible, but it takes too much chakra to be of use in the vast majority of situations. Even Naisama considers it a waste. On the other hand, it takes me far less chakra for the same effect than it does him, more than our minor difference in chakra control accounts for. As such, I hypothesized that the difference is in the exact way somebody achieves the effect and their understanding of the processes involved. As such, perhaps somebody who has a far superior understanding of physics and the nature of chakra than me will be able to change the weather using less chakra than the average fresh genin has available. This hypothesis has seemed to pan out thus far, after many tests related to efficiency, even though I have a long way to go before I even get close to the theoretical maximum I envisioned. That's interesting. I've always wondered why most of my jutsu were that much more efficient than other people's, even though there should have been a limit to how much of the chakra leakage can be shaved off. his aunt said over Naruto's shoulder, with him trying to shrug her off. It's probably because I've studied texts from the ancient times. When Naruto turned around, the cunning smile Tsunade had on her face made him shiver. You have a week that you've been ordered to rest your body, right? Tsunade said, increasing Naruto's dread. It wasn't exactly an order, Auntie, Naruto said, but Tsunade wouldn't hear of it. Time to hit the books and try some experiments, his aunt said, stamping on the ground and blushing, embarrassed, when she made a few trees topple from the quake.